we're going to look at the event that led to the establishment of the Geological Survey of Western Australia and some of the most significant milestones achieved in its 133 years long history. I'd like to start by reminding ourselves of how big a state Western Australia really is, both relative to the Australian continent and to other countries in the world. It's a huge landmass, very remote, very harsh, and with a very sparse population. Geologically, Western Australia has a very long and complex history that spans the whole time scale from the Archean through the Proterozoic to the Phanerozoic. And in our rocks, we have recorded the assembly and dispersal of several supercontinental cycles. Of course, Western Australia has been settled by Aboriginal for tens of thousands of years before the Europeans arrived in 1616 with the Dirk-Hartog expedition. The first European settlement in Western Australia was in Albany in December 1826. But soon after, the promises of agricultural land, rich agricultural land, led to the establishment of another colony, the Sword River colony, near where Perth is established today. There were also rumours at the time that the French were about to establish a penal colony near Shark Bay, so the British rushed to the area. The colony was renamed officially Western Australia in February 1832 and rejoined the Australian Federation as a state in January 1901. The early days of the colony were very harsh. The promised rich agricultural land didn't materialize. The land was very difficult to clear, to grow crops, and the population of the colony was growing very, very slowly in these early days. So expeditions were conducted both along the coast and inland to look for water, pastoral land, and minerals. The Gregory brothers were among the people who conducted some of these expeditions, and they were the ones that discovered in 1846 coal at the Irwin River. A few years later, lead was discovered at Northampton, and very quickly lead and copper became one of the largest exports of the colony after wool and sandalwood. The discovery of gold came much later at Coolgardie and Kalgoorlie. During this expedition, despite these forgotten explorers not being trained geologists, several important geological observations were made, as exemplified by this cross-section published in 1861. The discovery of coal in 1846 and the potential for mineralization led the government to appoint the first temporary government geologist in September 1847. This was the first of three over a period of 40 years. Ferdinand von Sommer was a man of mystery who claimed many titles and professions to his name, some undoubtedly very dubious. He travelled widely, and amongst other things he examined coal shaft, which was drilled in the Darling Range near Armidale for lead and copper, and this is the first recorded mining shaft in Western Australia. Despite not being very highly regarded by the geologists, his maps do show some reasonable geological knowledge and are the first known large-scale map of Western Australia. Von Sommer's lack of accomplishment in finding mineralization led to a gap of about 20 years before a new temporary government geologist was appointed. Henry York Lyle Brown came from Canada and had real geological qualification from the London's Royal School of Mines, and had also worked previously for the Victorian Geological Survey. In only 2 years, he had prepared 3 geological maps and issued 10 reports. He discovered the first artesian water near Perth, and his exploration included the discovery of the Weld Range, named for the governor of the day. However, despite impressing the governor, he was essentially driven out by local politicians and journalists who very strongly criticized him and these results, and also suggested that this young man had got a snug billet by corrupt means. So, to the delight of the Perth Gazette and WA Times, the governor of the day decided to replace Mr. Geology Brown, as he was derisively referred to, with a party of practical mining men from Victoria. And the 16 imported miners from Ballarat didn't find any mineralization either. After After Brown's departure, another 20 years passed. But seeing the impact of the discovery of gold in New South Wales and Victoria in the late 1850s and the economy of those states, the government of the Swan River Colony decided in 1872 to offer a reward of £5,000 for the discovery of the payable goldfields within 300 miles of any of the colony established ports. They also employed Edward Townley Abman, who had a good academic and practical background, having studied in Ireland. He was sent by the government to look for gold and other minerals in the Kimberley, and on his second expedition there in 1884, he found a little alluvial gold and brought a favourable report. He also produced a map that was highly regarded by prospectors and contributed to the discovery in 1885 of the first payable gold find in the colony on the Panther River near Orrs Creek. And here is a view of the whole map that sparked the Kimberley gold rush. Hardman was also very accomplished at sketching, and some of his drawings are very precious documents of his travels and of life as a geologist in the late 19th century. He certainly cut a very distinctive figure in his helmet and monocle when he was travelling along the Kimberleys. After his travel, Hardman returned to continue geological work for the state. However, the government, due to the cost, would not agree to his post being made permanent, so he decided to return to Ireland. The appointment of Hardman had been very controversial. Many in the Legislative Assembly of the colony put little faith in the knowledge and experience of geologists, and as you can see from some of the quotes here, particularly scathing were the comments by Mr. Septimus Burt and Mr. Mackenzie Grant, who really disparaged the work of qualified geologists, rather touting the accomplishment of practical men over the scientific gentlemen. And just some example here highlighted in red, it was considered as Hardman, as a competent geologist, will only run about the Kimberley district in a trap or on horseback and eat bacon and eggs. Also, geologists were considered never to have discovered anything which proved of much practical advantage to a new country. So give me a practical man any day before all these scientific gentlemen. Several members of the Assembly, however, did recognise the contribution that Hardman's geological work would make to the development of the colony, and the parliamentary debates for 1885 record that on 17 August, a motion to establish a permanent geological department was introduced by Sir Thomas Cockburn Campbell. The geologist in charge of such department was to combine with the duties of his primary office those of public analyst. That was the brief. The motion was supported by Mr. John Forrest, who recognised that scientific men left something of record of interest not only to this colony, but throughout the civilised world. But the opposition of Mr. Mackenzie Grant and Mr. Septimus Burt was again very strong. Here again some of the comments. Or what good has any geologist ever done to Western Australia? Referring to Mr. Hardman, he may have made an elaborate map, but perhaps would see the light of day hereafter. But it was easy to make a map and colour it with auriferous indication. Give me the practical man any day before all the scientific gentlemen. And again, it isn't advisable to establish a geological department. So the motion was defeated 12-5. But the tide was turning, and the following year, an item for an expenditure of £1,000 to establish a geological survey was approved with little opposition, and applications were invited. Only 2 were received, and on 13 June 1887, it was decided to offer the position to Hardman, who had sadly passed away very shortly before in Ireland. So the position was offered to the only other applicant, Harry Page Woodward, who had served as an assistant to Brown in South Australia. Woodward arrived in Perth on 9th January 1888 to take up the position, and this date is taken as the date that marks the foundation of the Geological Survey of Western Australia. And finally, the state had fallen in line behind other jurisdictions in the country to have finally a geological survey. Harry Page Woodward was the first of 13 government geologists that had presided over the work of the survey in his 133-year-old history. The title, as to be noted, was changed to Director under Joe Lord. Woodward had enormous academic and practical geological experience both in the UK and Australia, and he was very energetic in his exploration efforts. Landing in Perth just as the colony's gold rushes were gaining pace, he hit the ground running and headed off almost immediately to the field. He eventually visited every goldfields in the colony, and before resigning in 1895, he published 21 reports and 6 geological maps. In particular, his 1894 Mining Handbook to the Colony of Western Australia was essential reading for miners and prospectors. During his tenure, and against his wishes, the Geological Survey became part of the Department of Mines in 1894, an association that continues today. He also made the prophetic observation in one of his reports that Western Australia had enough iron ore to supply the world, but he provided no specific details. Andrew Gibb Maitland, the second government geologist, is the longest serving, and also the inspiration of the coveted Gibb Maitland Medal awarded by the Western Australian Division of the Geological Society of Australia for outstanding contribution to geoscience in the state. The medal has been awarded to 8 Geological Survey geoscientists since its inception in 1986. Originally qualified in the UK as a civil engineer, Maitland had worked as a geologist in Queensland and in Papua, then British New Guinea, one of the first government geologists to do so. Over 30 years, he forged the survey into an efficient organisation with a self-sufficient system capable of producing geological maps. And this was done with the support of a chemist surveyor, draftsman and office staff. The total number of staff under Maitland reached 9. His bibliography of the geology of Western Australia, published in 1898, was the first of 91 survey bulletins issued under his direction. The series is currently up to number 151. He believed that geological science is not only the interpreter of nature, but the servant of humanity. And thanks to his efforts, scores of successful bores for artesian water were drilled. And this opened up large tracts of country to agriculture. Under his tenure, 13 Christmas cards were also produced using images from the field and the office. The glass plate negative collection is still housed at the survey and is a treasure trove of images depicting mapping the remote regions of the state, as well as the images of early explorers and mining and the harsh condition of living at the time. By the time Maitland retired in November 1926, about half of the state had been geologically investigated by survey staff. 2 significant expeditions took place during Maitland's tenure. The geological investigation conducted in both cases by Henry William Beamish Talbot, who was initially employed as a temporary assistant for the survey in 1899. He went on to become one of WA's finest geologists without any formal training, but largely thanks to 4 years of tutoring in the field by Gibb Maitland himself, and by a plan of studying devised by Maitland for training young graduates. The first expedition I'm going to mention is the one along the Canning Stock Route. After Canning, a surveyor, had been given the task of establishing a practical stock route from the Kimberley region down to Wiluna, across about 1800 kilometers of desert, and this was to provide cattle for the markets in the eastern goldfields. He and his party surveyed the route in 1906-07, and in 1908 began work to sink wells along the route to provide water for the drovers at regular intervals. This route was really totally unknown geologically, and Talbot was assigned the job of mapping a strip of up to 250 kilometers on either side of the route. He was provided with 2 riding camels and an assistant, and would leave the party at one of the wells, carrying provision for 4 or 5 weeks and about 55 liters of water, and he would generally join the party at another well further north. The Mapping of the stock route occupied Tauber from September 4th in 1908, when he left Wiluna, to August 13 the following year, when he finally reached Halls Creek in the Kimberley. However, when he reached Halls Creek, he received telegraphic instruction to proceed to the Tanami goldfields in the Northern Territory, and finally returned to Perth after spending a total of 426 days in the field. And during this trip, he took many glass plate photographs that illustrate anything from Aboriginal rock painting, miners' accommodation, camping, explorers' life. Another expedition is the one along the Laverton-Warburton Road in 1916. The main purpose of the expedition was to investigate potential mineral-bearing country reported by an explorer, Frank Hahn, in 1903. The explorer assigned the notes and suite of samples to the survey, and they suggested that the geology of the area could be similar to that of the state goldfields, and also assays of the samples did show indeed some gold. So with Talbot in command, a party consisting of 2 geologists, 4 assistants and 16 camels left Laverton in June 16. By August, they reached the Warburton Range area and set up a base camp, from which traverses were to be made to map the surrounding country. On the 9th of September 10, the party was attacked by Aboriginal people, and one of the assistants, Johnson, was severely wounded, and Talbot himself received some minor injuries. Despite a delay of about a month, caused by the need to get Johnson back to Laverton for medical attention, the party succeeded in mapping some 1,500 square miles of country in the Warburton Range area, as well as making geological observation along the route from Laverton. And this is a picture of the train camels that were used at the time. Survey staff declined during World War I and the Great Depression. The survey was not to approach its former size and significance until the mineral boom that followed World War II. It was not until 1979 that mapping of the state at 1 to 250,000 scale was completed under the tenure of Joe Lord. This was an epic effort that resulted in the production of 103 maps. Joe Lord was a passionate believer in economic geology and presided over the Geological Survey during the early days of iron ore mining in Western Australia. The core library in Kalgoorlie is dedicated to him. He also recognised that the main role of the survey was one of service to industry. The critic may ask, what mine did they find? The answer is none, simply because it is not the task of the survey to find mine. But his role is to provide geological advice, maps and services to encourage the search for new deposits. By the time Joe Lord was heading the survey, the staff has increased significantly. We had a significant fleet of vehicles. The survey was mapped using aerial survey, and there were many more women being employed. It is worth noting that the first woman employed by the surveyors in about 1929 was Miss Florence Armstrong. She actually had a Bachelor of Science in Geology and was employed as a clerk, despite conducting petrological work for the survey. But things have changed now, luckily. Dr. Alec Trendle took over from Joe Lord in 1980. He recognized the importance of accurate geochronology for the mapping of Precambrian rocks, of which we have many in the state, and was instrumental in establishing a close partnership with Professor John DeLater, head of the Applied Physics Department at the Western Australian Institute of Technology, now Curtin University. Together, they purchased the first shrimp, which really revolutionized our understanding of the geological evolution and mineralization in Western Australia. Another major achievement of Dr. Trendle was the completion in 1990, after his retirement, of Memoir 3. This is a compendium of the geology and mineral resources knowledge of the state at the time, and it's worth noting that it's only the third in the history of the survey. The first having been published in 1919 as Bulletin No. 7 under Maitland, and in 1975, Memoir 2 under Joe Lord. Later directors have continued to steer the Geological Survey towards the goal set out by Joe Lord. and have embarked in significant projects to ensure the production of robust interpretation of tectonic setting, crustal architecture, and geological evolution that can be used by explorers. This has involved acquiring statewide airborne geophysical datasets, funding seismic profiling, conducting stratigraphic drilling, and generating 3D models. The Exploration Incentive Scheme was introduced in 2009 to encourage exploration in Western Australia. It's now a $10 million initiative that includes a co-funded exploration drilling program, now in its 24th round, as well as an energy analysis program. The scheme has been independently assessed to have a strong multiplier effect on the state economy. We have modernised our field data capture, and we continue indeed to map the state with a strong presence on the ground. And we are at the forefront of multi-layer digital data delivery, with addition of new data sets all the time, but especially under last financial year accelerated geoscience project designed to aid the economic recovery of the state during and after COVID. The value of our work is recognised by the consistent high ranking of Western Australia as an exploration destination that we receive from the Fraser Institute survey of mining company. I'd like to get to a close by showing the 13 state maps that have been produced during the 133-year-long history of the survey, the first one in 1894 to the most recent one in 2015. And you can see our geological understanding of Western Australia has been improved in time. I also like to acknowledge some contribution, as well as giving you some further reading for those of you who may like to go back and find out more about the fascinating history of our institution. And finally, a little bit of a pictorial history of how we have evolved in terms of the way we make map, the way we travel from camels, cars, and now helicopters and drones, the way we camp, the way we've been dressing in the field, and the way some things never change because, after all, we are always geologists. Thank you very much.